Okay, this evening we have UU Chuck Collins, uh, a very productive author who's just written a new book, um, Burned by Billionaires. And we're looking forward to all you have to share because you've got both feet in the battle for economic justice. And that's fantastic.
Okay, well, thank you, Terry. Thanks for all of you for coming out. Great to see some old friends here and see some familiar names. Um, as Terry said, I have a new book out, and of course, I love talking about this topic. But let me um, set the context. Maybe people could mute themselves if you're not talking, just so there's less background noise, if you don't mind. And then the I had a very short-lived career as a congressional intern to Barney Frank, Congressman Barney Frank. He was a kind of an amazing guy, but as a 22-year-old intern, it was kind of intimidating to work for him because he would come into the meeting. You'd be researching something. I was usually researching something related to housing, and so he would come in the room and say, I prepared my little presentation, and he'd say, uh, tell me something I don't know. And that was, and then you had to think, is there anything he doesn't know? Probably not. So if you're thinking you're coming to a discussion about how billionaires are hijacking our democracy, you're probably thinking, tell me something I don't know. So I am going to try to tell you a few things that you may not know, or a few ways to think about this, and maybe uh, some of the campaigns and strategies to address this billionaire concentration of wealth and power. That's my modest hope. And I was just going to talk for 25 minutes or so and then open up for your questions and comments. Um, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how you personally are being burned by billionaires. That's kind of the topic of the book. And the reason I wrote it, I had this, as the co-editor of inequality.org, somebody wrote to me and said, there's nothing that a billionaire is doing that's affecting and harming my life. And I said, this book, I'm writing this book for you. Um, so I will talk about that, but I want to just start with a couple of context points. Uh, One is you do sort of hear a sort of sloppy chatter in the progressive circles about abolishing billionaires, or some people think my book is Burn the Billionaires. Um, and I think that is not helpful. I think it sort of has that whiff of exterminism. We don't really want to encourage that. What we want to focus on is not the individual behavior of billionaires, but an economic system that funnels so much wealth upwards. It's not sort of about money so much, it's about power. So that's focus is I really want to talk about a system that funnels wealth to the top. And then a lot of people say, well, who are the wealthy? Or is this just the billionaires you're talking about? And I have a chapter in the book called The Roadmap to Richistan, where I try to explain, there's the top 10% of wealth holders, which is a significant group. And together, the top 10% has 90% of all the stock market wealth. Um, but then there are different levels of Richistan, and then there's Billionaireville. And Billionaireville is obviously it's 905 billionaires in the US who have like $8 trillion combined, huge concentration of wealth. So how do we understand, who's got the power? And in a nutshell, I think the point we want to look at is around the 30 to 40 million dollar mark. When somebody has 30 million dollars, they have enormous comforts. They've met their needs. Their children are fine. They probably are flying in a private jet or always in first class. They have multiple homes. They have created a bubble of protection around them, and they have a lot of autonomy and control and agency in their lives. But when you get above 30, $40 million, what I would call the top 1/10 of 1%, you're not just buying mansions or private jets, you're buying senators and media outlets, and you're using your power to hire a whole professional armada of people who help you lobby or help you dodge taxes. I think I came on and talked a couple of years ago about a book I wrote called The Wealth Hoarders, how billionaires pay millions to hide trillions. I have only one regret, which is I didn't title the book How to Hide $1 Billion. I think it would have sold better. But that 30, $40 million point is where people start to hire, a large team of tax attorneys. They may have a family office. They pay people to help them essentially create trusts and create kind of shell games and move the money to the shadows. They also have the power to begin to fight, push back against their competitors and kind of build monopolies. Um, so that's a key point for me is sort of where the wealth and power lies. And I would say a lot of the focus of our policy should be not just on the billionaires who obviously have tremendous power, but really that top 1/10 of 1%. And those are the folks who've really reaped most of the gains, both the income and wealth gains of the last 15 years. So when I say billionaires tonight in this program, that's kind of shorthand for that top 1/10 of 1%. Third sort of context thing is I just want you to realize I think we're living what I would call the hyper extractive phase of capitalism. We're all familiar with sort of, and in the book I talk about four stages of wealth accumulation. There's the first stage when often somebody, creates a business or invents a better mousetrap, and it creates something maybe useful, provide a service, and people are willing to pay for it, and they accumulate wealth. And I tell the story of my town in Brattleboro, Vermont. There was a guy who, made a great burrito, and he started selling them at the street corner out of a cooler, and then he got a food truck, and now he has a restaurant. Now he has three restaurants, and people say, well, Tito has become wealthy. Yeah, he's in that first phase of entrepreneurial wealth. He's, you know, has the headaches of running a small business. He's not going to become a billionaire, even if he sells out to Chipotle. Uh, but that is the narrative or the story of wealth creation. And we like to kind of project that onto all these wealth stories, the humble origin story. But when you hit that 30, $40 million mark, you start to invest in wealth defense, which is what I was talking about, hiring the enablers, and you invest in political capture, exercising your wealth and power in the political sphere. The final stage, which I think explains a lot of how we're getting burned by billionaires, is this hyper extractive phase. When people have so much wealth, and you need to kind of get into your inner billionaire here. You have $1 billion. What are you going to do with all that money? Where are you going to park it? Where are you going to invest it? Some of it may be in the company that you started, but a lot of people are diversifying and they have all their advisors saying, you know, put that money in those high return, high, investments. Now, I don't know if any of you are listening here have money in a savings account or a checking account. What's your financial return on that checking account? Uh, yeah, it's kind of like I always get the little statement for my taxes and think, wow, I'm hoping it moves into the double digits here, 1%, 2%. Well, what the really wealthy folks are told, their advisors will say, let's put this money in these private equity funds or these other investments, and we'll get 22% returns or 24% returns, huge returns that are mostly only available to the very wealthy who are speculating with the portion of that money. Well, that money goes into a private equity fund. Well, where are they going to get those returns? They have to go out and find the corners of the economy where they can make those kind of investments and squeeze more money out of productive businesses. Hence the private equity vehicle, which Matt Taibbi, you may recall, in his characterization of Goldman Sachs described them as vampire squids that have attached themselves to the face of the economy and are taking their tentacles and trying to jam them into every corner to extract some more money, anything that smells like money. That is the hyper extractive. And I'll talk about a couple of examples of that. The final thing is to say this isn't about Trump. Trump is a symptom of what happens to self-governing republics that get too much out of balance. And I kind of cite the work of historian Peter Turchin, who talks a lot about what happens to republics when there's this extreme imbalance of wealth and they move toward a authoritarian direction. And you have to realize you can't maintain these levels of inequality in a democratic society. During the first Gilded Age, Louis Brandeis said, you can have concentrated wealth in the hands of a few, or you can have democracy, but you cannot have both. And so it's not a surprise at all that we're both seeing a drift toward authoritarianism and we're seeing more focus on attacking vulnerable people and immigrants. That's how you maintain power in an oligarchy. You have to deflect and distract people, and you have to uh, eliminate people's voices and votes when possible. So those are just a couple of contexts, and I'm going to talk just a couple about a couple of the ways you're being burned by billionaires. Some of these may not be that surprising, but I hope there's a few in there that are a little bit surprising. And number one is you're paying the taxes of the billionaires. The wealthy over the last 40 years have figured out how to shift their tax obligations off of themselves and on to everyone else, both by changing the laws governing taxes, but also engaging in kind of the shenanigans and wealth hiding and tax dodging that wealthy people are able to do. So you're paying more for the public services that are out there. Oh, and by the way, the billionaire class loves these government shutdowns. They love anything that sort of makes people realize they don't, the government doesn't work for them and that they're on their own and they need to find a private solution to their major problems. But, I live in a small Vermont town where people grumble about their property taxes and, oh, it's that darn select board. They're always voting for things that cost more money. You mean like healthcare for teachers, things like that? That tends to be, or the road crew, So what's happened is we've shifted kind of invisible shifts off of the federal tax system, which is more progressive, onto state and local tax systems, which are more regressive, off of wealth and income from wealth and assets onto wage earners, off of corporations onto individuals. And you could engineer those shifts over decades, and lo and behold, more people are paying more at the state and local level, and a lot of the services have been also shifted to that level. So the rich opting out of their taxes is costing you more, or it's costing you in terms of budget cuts. So that's an obvious one, or one that I would focus on. Maybe the most obvious is the billionaire capture of our political system has taken away your voice and vote, diminished your power and in a democracy. I'm not going to dwell on that one. I think that's an obvious one for this audience. The billionaires are supercharging the housing crisis. So we have millions of people unsheltered. We have lots of people in rental housing paying half their income. There's a whole generation of people who would like to own a home and are locked out of home ownership. And the billionaires see that and are worsening it. And again, there are invisible forces, not just the old-fashioned gentrification where wealthy people could bid up the cost of land and housing, but billionaire-backed private equity funds are moving into the housing market to, again, extract more wealth from this basic need of housing. And so you see investor groups buying up rental housing and converting it to short-term rentals. Places where people used to live and raise families are now short-term rentals. I'm not talking about mom and pop Airbnb. I'm talking about big corporate players buying up dozens, hundreds of units of housing in a particular market. We see
We did too.
private equity moving into buying up mobile home parks. And I got my organizing start as a tenant organizer, working with residents in mobile home parks who were trying to buy their parks. Well, one of the big investor owners said, buying a mobile home park, owning a mobile home park is like owning a Waffle House where your customers are chained to the booths. They have nowhere else to go. And that is the case in many mobile home parks. They're buying up single family houses. Jeff Bezos is a big investor in a big fund that buys up single family houses and rents them to people who have lost the hope that they'll ever be able to own a home, but they'd like to have raise their family in a single family home with a little yard. And so now you go to whole neighborhoods where you walk around a residential neighborhood and half the units are owned by outside investors renting them to residents, not selling them. Um, and finally, you have all these billionaires from around the world who are bringing their wealth to the US, building luxury towers, and US and domestic billionaires building luxury housing, not to live in, but as kind of safe deposit boxes in the sky, places to park and hold wealth. And again, if you have $1 billion, you need to spread your money around. You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. So you buy a luxury condominium in Toronto and one in Montreal and one in New York and one in LA, and you have spread your assets around over multiple real estate markets. But because the US has become this huge tax haven for people to hide their money, people are bringing their wealth to the US and buying up land and housing. There's a reason why Bill Gates is the largest owner of farmland in the United States. He just has so much money he needs to park it somewhere. Um, Another kind of way in which we're all being burned by billionaires is it's just inflaming the existing divisions that are there. We've had this historic racial wealth divide. You have a gap between uh, home ownership of people of color and white households, a racial wealth divide that's persistent over centuries. And these inequality dynamics only supercharge and worsen the existing divisions and fomenting this kind of racism and scapegoating culture. So to the extent we have existing cleavages, these inequalities make them worse. Let me just mention two more that I think might be of interest to you all. Uh, the billionaires are trashing the environment. They are the super emitters. We're all being told, especially by the fossil fuel companies, that every one of you is responsible for climate change. You should all be measuring your carbon footprint and taking measures to reduce your energy consumption. And that's true. We all have a role, especially those of us who live in the United States and have benefited from, a century of fossil fuel funded infrastructure and the like. But there's a reason we should be critical about that. One is that the billionaires are the super emitters. That top 1/10 of 1%, uh, they have bigger houses, they have higher levels of consumption, they fly private jets, they use yachts. Yachts are among the most polluting form of transportation out there. So uh, that the fact is, and Oxfam has done a number of studies on this, the top 1% are the global super emitters, causing up to half of all the greenhouse gas emissions. Um, why does that matter? Well, it not only matter, it means that the wealthy are going to have to change their behavior much more than everyone else, and they should be leading the way in changing their behavior. But in fact, they're the last to change their behavior. I work on a campaign to try to stop private jet expansions at an airport in New England, and private jet travel is accelerating. It's one of the fastest growing forms of transportation, luxury private jets. Why does this matter? Because it also undercuts the kind of solidarity and sense of shared sacrifice that we're all going to need to face the disrupted future. I know UUs for Just Economic Community have had lots of discussions about both inequality and climate disruption, this is where it comes together. And, in order to encourage each of us to make changes in our lives, we're going to feel like chumps. If Terry's like saying, well, I'm going to ride my bike or I'm going to pay a little extra money to get a more efficient vehicle, but, Kylie Jenner's flying their jet across town to have lunch with their friend, you're going to feel like, why am I doing this? I'm a chump. So the fact that the billionaires are the ones who need to change their behavior and seemingly the last to change their behavior undercuts that sense of solidarity. And that doesn't even count what I call the fossil fuel oligarchs, the oil and gas and coal barons who use their wealth and power and position to block the transition to a green future. They're the ones who've worked hard to get Trump elected and are dismantling climate legislation, keeping zombie coal plants open, shutting down wind projects. That's their fantasy. They are in this for very short-term gains. They just want to take the money and run for 5 more years, and Trump is enabling them. But they are climate criminals in my mind. And you'll see a website we created called climatecriminals.org, where you can see who are the individuals who are using their wealth and power and position to block our and run out the clock to an orderly transition. Uh, a final reason that I want you to, the way you're being burned by billionaires is that they are making you sick. They're literally undermining the public health of the country and the private health, the healthcare system. Um, Billionaire-backed private equity funds are looking at the health economy and they're saying, wow, this is a sixth of the economy and it's just ripe for wealth extraction and predation. And so they're buying up hospitals, they're buying up emergency rooms, they're buying up medical specialties, um, and they're controlling the drug companies. And they're all doing this so they can squeeze a bit more out of the healthcare consumer. And the private equity model is to buy up a hospital and squeeze the workers, make staffing cuts, uh, slice and dice off the real estate assets and sell off whatever's profitable and squeeze whatever's left till it goes out of business. And, there was a hospital in Boston, not far from where I lived, Carney Hospital. Like a lot of hospitals, it was started by a religious order, religious organization, or a civic-oriented group, a nonprofit hospital, and got sold to a private equity fund, Cerberus Capital. It created something called Steward Healthcare, which bought up 10 more hospitals, and then just did this private equity squeeze. And if you have the unfortunate experience of having to go to a hospital or emergency setting these days, now you get like 5 different bills, one from the anesthesiologist group and the physicians group and the specialty group. And, they're all, a lot of them are owned by big investor groups. The first investment they make is in billing. They want to basically make sure nobody gets away without getting a lot of bills. So that's why you get a lot of mail from your healthcare practitioner. This is private equity moving in and squeezing the healthcare system. But we also know inequality, concentrations of wealth are bad for societal health. Uh, you know, the work of Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett, The Spirit Level, and books like that that basically say, look, the more unequal society, the worse the health outcomes are for everybody, even affluent households. It's because there's that breakdown in solidarity necessary for good public health. So that's the one. And I have one that's a surprise that you may not have thought of. Hopefully, this is in the telling you something you didn't know, but the billionaires are coming for your pets. Any of you have animals in your lives that are members of your family? The big billionaire investors know you're willing to go to spend money on the health and well-being of these other animals that are part of our family. And you're even people are willing to go into debt for their medical care. Um, so the big investor private equity groups have moved in veterinary hospitals, uh, uh, animal services, pet food, Pet food is largely owned by the Mars company. The Mars family is a wealthy dynastic family that made their money in candy, but now they're moving into healthcare for animals, veterinary services. They're one of the owners of the largest veterinary chain. They're smart about it. They kind of try to maintain a mom and pop exterior, but it's worth asking if you take your cat or dog or ferret or other beloved animal to the animal hospital, say, who owns you all? Who owns you? And you know how it works. The first thing they ask you when you walk in there is uh, to swipe your credit card, and you're not going to walk out of there for less than a couple $1,000s. So that is an example. Even the pet services that anybody, there's an app called Rover.com, and I learned about this from a friend of mine who's a dog walker, who's met some of her dog walking clients through Rover.com. Well, guess who bought Rover.com 2 years ago? Uh, Blackstone, the $1 trillion private equity fund. They understand they're going to squeeze and skim a little bit of money off of our love for our animals. Um, what's on your dinner plate? That's being dictated by the wealth. The corruption of charity. A friend of mine came to a book talk I did a week ago. He's in a wheelchair. He had a terrible skiing accident, and he's been in a wheelchair for about 10 years. He said, he gave me a couple articles. Two giant billionaire-backed private equity funds control the wheelchair market. They get the public money and they get the private money for all these wheelchairs. So on and on, I could talk, about media ownership, your media consumption, but let me just say a few things about what we can do about this, and then look forward to any thoughts, questions you have. Um, the first thing I would just say is, and most of this book is devoted toward the solutions. Um, but a really important first step, doesn't sound like an action, but I think it is to understand how each of us are being burned by billionaires, and then talk to our neighbors. Bring that lens, bring that perspective to the problems that you're dealing with. When your neighbor complains about their local property taxes, try to explain this is how it works. When people talk about the cost of healthcare, explain how healthcare is being taken over and hijacked by the billionaires. If you are talking about veterinary services and why it seems you're having to pay more, talk about the hijacking and takeover by the billionaires. Let people know about that. It's almost like both look at your budget, how much of your income every month goes off to a billionaire-backed conglomerate or corporation, who's skimming and squeezing your budget. And also look at your community. Who's buying what? Where are the large outside owners coming in? And where are their independent local businesses that we should try to defend and protect? Um, in my town, we had at the very beginning of the school year, the school bus drivers wanted a tiny raise, and the school bus company, which has this local family name on the side of it, locked out all the bus drivers and brought in scab bus drivers to drive the buses the first week of school. And we looked into it. A big private equity, billionaire-backed private equity firm had bought our school bus company and was refusing to give the drivers even this tiny little incremental raise, uh, even though they're paid through a contract through the school system. So, we didn't know that. So now it's just important to understand and then defend what we got. Defend the commons, defend the healthcare system. Maybe private equity investors shouldn't buy our healthcare system. Maybe there's some walls and some lines that we should put out there. So read the news and understand the world through this lens of how you're being burned by billionaires. A second piece of this program is we have to talk about taxes. Not just because that's where the money is to raise revenue to make investments, but progressive taxes are how you slow the concentration of wealth and power. And we used to tax the billionaire class before they were billionaires. We had a tax system, and now we're seeing that being dismantled, and the wealth is staying, and it's creating hereditary wealth dynasties, multi-generational accumulations of wealth, and that's where we're heading here. Um, But, talk to our neighbors and then engage in what I call game-changing campaigns. And some of these might be, at the federal level, there's not obviously in this moment not a lot we can do, but there are things people are doing at the state and local level. Um, you may have heard today that California, a group of folks in California have put a new ballot initiative on the ballot for 2026 that would tax billionaires, create an emergency tax on billionaires that would fund the imperiled health access for 15 million state Medicaid recipients. So a game-changing campaign addresses a problem that has a constituency, 15 million people who are at risk of losing their health care or their health care as premium is going to go skyrocket up. Funded, fix that with a tax, in this case, a 5% wealth tax on the 200 plus billionaires from California. Raises $100 billion a year. 5% is not enough to cause anybody to leave the state. It gives the billionaires a stake in restoring at the federal level uh, the tax system that funds state Medicaid. So that's a great example. Uh, Tax luxury real estate transfers and fund affordable housing. You want to address green infrastructure, fund private jet fuel, and fund green transit. Private jet owners don't pay anywhere near the fair share of the current transit costs that they impose, that they take, the use of the airspace. So let's tax luxury private jets and make investments in things that enable everybody else to have a decent life. Tax, fund debt-free education and job training. How do we do that? We fund it with a robust inheritance tax, a tax on inherited wealth. Um, so those are some of the things, and people are organizing this, and we can weigh in on them. But the key formula is find something people care about that they're willing to fight for, their health care, their housing, access to education, environmental infrastructure. We're willing to fight and go out and campaign and organize it and pay for it with a revenue or tax on the harm. Tax the harm and fund the public goods. Another thing that I think in this moment is really important is to join the satirical resistance. We need some humor. We need to laugh. We need to deal with the fact that we have an authoritarian government. They would love to see acts of violence so they can declare the Insurrection Act and crack down on legitimate dissent. How is Portland, Oregon responding to that with people dressed up as green jumping frogs and unicorns? And we saw this during the Three Kings March or the No Kings March. People saying dressed up and keeping their humor up. Well, some of you might remember Billionaires for Bush, which was a whole movement, a satirical movement 20 years ago, pre-internet, broad internet. And so we've launched Trillionaires for Trump. Check out trillionairesfortrump.org. You can form, all it takes is 3 or 4 of you to form a little Trillionaires for Trump chapter. Just need to create a name for yourself, a fictional billionaire name, and put a good costume together and get out there. And next time there's one of these big marches, why don't your little Trillionaire for Trump group go out and entertain the protesters and take those messages over the top? In New York City now, there's a Billionaires Against Madani, the candidate for mayor. They have funny signs. If you go to the website, you'll see the signs they have. They're things like, "We want slow and expensive buses for everyone," you know, things like that. They actually have a healthcare campaign. The Trillionaires for Trump have launched a healthcare campaign. It's called Go Fund Yourself. That's their solution to the healthcare crisis. So yeah, check out Trillionaires for Trump because satire is a form of power. It's a way to make fun of the moment we're in, Authoritarians hate jesters. They hate the late night comedians that make fun of them and tell the truth with humor. And as Oscar Wilde says, uh, you have to tell the truth or we'll kill you. So that's, and then I would just invite folks to check out this book. Uh, Hopefully you'll read it, buy it for a friend, but also check out inequality.org, which is the website I co-edit, which is a resource for people who we have a little weekly newsletter and we try to keep people up on what's the good news, who are the leaders that are doing stuff, where are the campaigns to plug into, and what's on the horizon. So check out inequality.org. So let me stop blathering and maybe I'll turn it back to Terry. And Terry, if you would be maybe willing to moderate or call on people and hear what people have to say. Any thoughts, questions, comments are fine. I don't mind if people want to make a comment, but probably your other audience listeners might want you to keep your comment under 2 hours. So yeah, back to you, Terry. You're on mute.
No one has their hand up yet. Um, that you you just you just took our whole argument and gave it. We've been talking about these things for many, many years. Alan has his
Yeah.
hand up. Go ahead, Alan.
Okay. So obviously, in recent years, we've seen billionaires and multimillionaires using their wealth to support candidates that can, reduce the taxes upon them and so forth, and shrink social spending in various ways, and been able to use social media and culture war issues and so forth to kind of get people to vote for candidates that are not necessarily in the economic interests of the voter. Um, do you think that with the increase in, I guess if you call it the housing crisis, the coming healthcare crisis because of the loss of, um, Affordable Care Act credits and things like that, that those things will finally break through and a larger share of the population will be realize they got to vote their economic interests rather than, they're just being ticked off about some cultural issue like, transgender use of some bathrooms or something like that is their voting issue, which is so minor in the scope of the issues facing American people. So I'd like to get your comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think
You got
what I think we're
text.
going to see is lots of people
You got
start to run
text.
for office based on the program of I want an economy that works for everybody, not just the billionaires. And we're seeing that. We're seeing candidates stepping out.
Mail.
We're seeing the battle over the Democratic Party, I think, is along the lines of who's going to be a progressive populist versus who's going to follow the donors. So, I think I'm optimistic, actually. I think, we're going to see a lot of progressive populists emerging and running for office. And I think it is important to say this is, these inequalities of the last 40 years have happened under Democratic administrations and Republican administrations. The Republican Party is obviously 99% lockstop captured by the billionaires. The Democrats 50%. So it's up for grabs. It's contested. And we're going to see lots of struggles within the Democratic Party over what's the future, what's the message. And they're all worried about their big donors. The big donors are always saying, well, don't talk about taxing the rich. Taxing the rich is incredibly popular. I think it's important to remember that 3 years ago, we came within 2 votes in the US Senate of passing Build Back Better, a $3.5 trillion investment that over 10 years that would have created a modern childcare system, lifted children out of poverty, dealt with healthcare, made huge climate adaptation investments, created a climate corps, like a Peace Corps for young people to be involved. I mean, and it was all going to be paid for by increasing taxes on multimillionaires and billionaires. And they were able to stop it by buying off Joe Manchin from West Virginia and Kristen Sinema from Arizona, who are set for life now because they did the bidding of the billionaires. But it wasn't that was we in a moment like this, it's hard to remember we came that close to something that would have been almost transformative. Um, so I think we have it in our muscle memory, we have it in our political memory, and we need more people to stand up and run for office with that kind of program. Um, and just also understand, yeah, as you said, Alan, we the opposition, the billionaires, and has invested in division. They've put up demagogue politicians that have deflected people's attention, onto drag queens and new immigrants and not on the billionaires. They have to do that. I mean, think about it. How does a minority rule? They have to either promise in a phony populist way, we hear your pain and we're going to address your harm and what's bothering you. Oh, and we're going to stop taxing tipped income, like throw a couple crumbs to working people, but and then turn around and give tax cuts for the ultra rich. So we need some authentic progressive populists to step forward and run, and we need to support them and work for them. I think that will help us turn the corner of where we're at. And I actually am optimistic. I think that the pendulum will swing because the current guy in power isn't going to really address the underlying harms and pain. There's only so many times you can be told it's that guy mowing your lawn that's the real problem, not the billionaire over here. At a certain point, uh, fool me once, fool me twice, fool me three times, you're Senator Susan Collins, as they say. But that people can only be suckered so much.
Cindy's first in line. I did want to mention that the tips was a nothing burger. No tax on tips. It was only on cash tips, and they're not paying taxes on cash tips already, so they never given anything away. Go ahead, Cindy.
Oh, Chuck, thank you so much for that incredible rundown of how we all suffer because of being burned by millionaires. I wanted to bring up the issue of the military coming into our cities. Um, I listened to some comments today online that were really powerful, suggesting that Trump is asking people in the military to step down if they don't agree with his policies. And in that process, creating and also it was mentioned that there are more young people joining the military since Trump has come up with this kind of thought moving forward. So I just, I guess I'm seeing that with a military that is completely loyal to Trump, we're headed in a direction that could only be more and more devastating for our cities and all of us. And clearly, the class he's supporting are the billionaires. So I was hoping maybe you could comment on that.
I don't have any unique perspective uh, more than any of the rest of us. I think it's just appalling and shocking. I actually think uh, it is one of the places where the last vestiges of old style Republicans, I think of like my father, are just appalled. They just can't believe these breaches of normality. So, you know, the good news is to me, there's a lot of cracks out there in the support and at some point the sleeping giant, as James Baldwin says, the cult of indifference in the country is going to wake up. People are going to wake up to this and hopefully push back. And I do think the Republicans are going to lose the midterms, even with all their gerrymandering. That we got to work like super hard to get back the House because that actually will change things. You don't have, bad legislation passing on reconciliation. Uh, the House could convene hearings and investigate. It can then use its power to block and subpoena. So you know, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, plan on a year from now being working out in some district to sort of reclaim the House in the midterms. I think that will help shift the equation. That's the political strategy, but it's a key political intervention. And talking to people about this ain't normal and U.S. troops coming into our cities and all these other sort of violations of norms are going to rub that great, vast, independent, sleeping voter class, stir people and wake them up.
Thank you. That's really good. Thank you, Chuck.
I would like to comment on that myself. Are there any statistics as to how many people are stepping down? Because most people joining the military either from a military class and their generations before them join the military, or they join because it's one of the few ways out of a bad economic situation. And they don't have the luxury to just quit just because Trump offends them. They have to go to work. And I'd be really surprised if they get that many people out of their way. Cheryl, you're next. You need to unmute though.
Hi, thank you. No, I got a couple of questions. One is with respect to the private equity interests in the medical industry right now and taking over hospitals and nonprofit and other private medical concerns. My question to you is, as someone who would want to maybe raise that as an issue with my local and my national representatives in legislature, how do I find out where the private equity firms are that are investing in local medical facilities? Particularly, I'm in West Virginia, so trust me when I say that the cuts that are coming from the federal government are devastating healthcare in West Virginia, and I can't help but think that it's understood that that's a prime opportunity for rapacious, venture capitalism to come in and take over. So how do we find out who it might be behind, um, scraping up the remains of what is the healthcare industry, and whether it's West Virginia or any place else? That's my first question. I'll let you respond to that, and then I have a second question.
I put in the chat a link to a network called Private Equity Stakeholders, which is the group that sort of researches the impact of private equity. There's a lot of good work going on in the space. One thing is to just sort of map out, well, do you still have some nonprofit-owned hospitals that are, not up for grabs, if you will? And where are the for-profit hospitals? What are the big conglomerates that own so who owns your hospitals? And then as you talk to legislators, you can say, well, you know, there's now a huge amount of research showing that hospitals owned for private equity are much worse for their patients on all kinds of levels. And in my book, you'll find all the citations and research on that. Gretchen Morgenson, the journalist, has a book called Plunderers, which is about private equity, and there's a lot in there about healthcare. And I cite a study that Senator Ed Markey from Massachusetts did, because we're the home of Steward Healthcare. So he actually commissioned a study that looked at all the kind of a summary of all the studies of private equity. So that's for sure one of the ways to look for things to look for. And then, yeah, continue with your questions there.
My second question has to do with the terrifying prospect of artificial intelligence and the sort of technology takeover of our minds, our everything. So I have, obviously I would love to read your book, but I'm curious to know, from what standpoint do you think that the AI technology dystopia that literally some of the weird ass sort of like mythologies that some of these trillionaires or billionaires have about like a future where they see humankind as not really being useful and we need to like redound everything to artificial intelligence. I mean, I guess my question is, how do we like meet that challenge? How do we react to that challenge? What do we do to prevent that from becoming an inevitability?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I do think uh, it's a particularly scary moment because of the high tech people that are highly invested in AI um, are also intersecting with the energy fossil fuel industry people. They're saying, we need to have these data centers and power AI, and we need to have coal plants stay open. So there's
Recognize that
sort of
voice?
those two things coming together.
Can hear you.
I don't have a unique insight, and maybe other people on here have more to add on that. But I do think uh, there are people who are looking to create more kind of public guardrails around AI. That's a great example of an issue that's not on the agenda because the billionaires are dominating our politics right now. So to support the next generation of leaders who want to regulate AI, cryptocurrency. These are all the bubbles, if you will, that are building up, that are ready to pop, and are going to have a hugely adverse impact on the rest of society. So, look for people who are doing that, pushing back. I'm not as up to speed on that I should be, but and I will be, but I'm not. And actually, well, at inequality.org, we do have a lot of articles and writing on that. Who are the people who are pushing back on the sort of AI revolution and that dystopian vision that is being put forward?
We had a webinar last month on artificial intelligence, and probably the scariest thing for me is who is funding it, and it's mostly the military that has invested in this, and that could have some really bad consequences. Sally, you're next.
Okay. Hello. It's good to see you, Chuck. I'm in from Iowa, and we hope you can go back to Iowa sometime. You were here 2017, I believe. So, I have two questions. One, are you doing a book tour?
I am not traveling as much, but if you invite me to come to Iowa, I love Iowa. So yeah. So yeah,
Okay.
make me an offer, and yeah, reach out to me or through the book website, Burned by Billionaires, and I have some folks who are. So yeah, but I'm mostly just doing writing and doing conversations like this. Happy to beam in for an hour to wherever. I really enjoy this as a format, and so that's one response.
I like what you said. You said two things that really stuck with me. One was the squeezing of when you were talking about hospitals, they squeeze, and then the tentacles. And that is exactly what's happening with agriculture. And Iowa's a big agriculture state. And I'm reading a book called Dodge County Inc., and it's about Minnesota, but it's very similar to the corporate farming that's happening. And what they do, the tentacles then find where the local laws are a little looser. They get in there and then they just keep buying all the land, making these CAFOs and squeezing everybody out. So I was wondering if that was happening in Vermont.
Well, I highly recommend a book by an Iowan named Austin Frerick, who wrote a book called Barons, which is about the food economy. And actually, I have a chapter in the book. I didn't really talk about this, but it's basically how the billionaires are dictating what's on your dinner plate. And it includes the Hensons, and Iowa Select, the largest pork producer in Iowa, how they use their wealth and power. By the way, they have a private jet called When Pigs Fly. That's what the name of their jet. They're from Iowa, but they mostly spend their time in Florida, I believe. But they have lobbied to fend off all the regulation of CAFOs and sort of the harmful practices in raising pork. So yeah, we are seeing that in Vermont too, though. We're seeing, the corporate capture and takeover of the food system. Almost every corner of the food system now has one or two mega companies that dominate it. Cargill Macmillan is a dynastically wealthy company that and family that controls a fourth of all the global grain in supply and infrastructure. So that is what the old robber baron trusts look like. So yeah, I would highly recommend Austin's book just to sort of understand how the food system is being warped by the billionaire takeover. And it's a great invitation to sort of protect what the independent food sector, such as we still have, local producers, etc.
Yeah. Jeff, you're ready to go?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yep.
You can tell you're from Vermont. I imagine Bernie has read your book because he certainly sounds like a lot of what you're saying. And it seems to be the only hope that we have is politics and democracy, is voting. You know, this is what the country was designed for, wasn't it? Is to if we don't like the leaders, then we vote them out. And it seemed to me that there used to be a level of decorum and outrage over corruption that the populace just wouldn't take. I mean, look at as late as 2016. When Hillary was caught in a private fundraiser saying, that there are a basket of deplorables that you don't want to, that you don't have to worry about because, they're not going to vote for you anyways, which is probably true. But it really damaged her campaign. And look at Hunter Thompson, right? Hunter Biden rather. Hunter Biden was a stone around Joe Biden's neck because of corruption. Well, holy shit! Excuse my language. I was viscerally disturbed by the video that came out this weekend of Trump flying over the protesters, and I was appalled by the gall of him suing his own government for $230 million. Don't you think that sooner or later people are going to go like, wait a minute, I thought he was going to clear up the swamp and he's made it much, much worse. Do you think any of that will catch on?
Yeah, I do think that as I say, I think the sleeping giant is waking up. I think particularly among farmers that I know in Vermont and other parts of the country are just like, whoa, can we return this package? There's something wrong between the tariffs and having their workers hijacked and kidnapped and, all the impact on prices. A good friend of mine has he's characterizing what's the program we should be focused on. A, B, C. Affordability, talking about, what's your, people complaining about their grocery bill? Well, let's explain to you what's happening to your grocery bill. A, affordability. B, billionaires. C, care and the caring economy. Healthcare being at the top of that list. So keep talking about those three issues and how the billionaires connect to all of that. Yeah, and actually, they're during the first Gilded Age, 1880 to 1915, we had the same kind of parallel concentration of wealth and power and the same corruption of the public sphere, the sort of appalling sort of insider deals and, the Teapot Dome scandal type stuff, all of that. And by the way, I live in a very small state. I think I can get Bernie. Hold on one sec. He's right here. Hold on.
I'm gonna raise a hand. Raise the hand. Yeah.
You trying to get Bernie on the phone? Oh, I see. Yeah, he's
Oh.
he's Bernie, all right.
I just want to say I highly recommend Chuck's book, and I want you to remember during the socialist presidency of Dwight Eisenhower, the rich paid a much higher tax rate, and we invested in things that helped working families, invest in housing, education, infrastructure that helped the middle class. It had a huge difference on everyone.
Was that really him?
Satire.
Put on a mask.
He put on a mask.
Yeah.
So
That's
anyway,
great.
that's the kind of place Vermont is. You're just your senator just drops by and says hello. So
That's funny.
I'm getting ready for Halloween. You can tell. Hey, I see Judy Deutsch out there. My friend Judy has a question. Off mute though. We're not going to be able to hear you, Judy. You're going to have to go off mute. Okay, well, maybe we won't hear you. We'll just see you. Hey, Judy, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Lower left-hand corner.
You want me to raise a hand, Lucy? No,
Can you hear us? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. The UUJEC is working to support Jayapal and Sanders'
Yeah, if I can. Oh, that's a,
Medicare for all or single payer bill. And the time has really come when a year ago you heard all the arguments against private health care. And it's about time all contacted our legislators to vote to endorse Jayapal's and Sanders' bills. They're wonderful. I've just read Sanders and I've skimmed over Jayapal's. They're both great. And it's about time this country caught up with the countries that aren't having the lowest death rate, the highest costs. It's absurd. And we need to vote for legislators who will back that.
I agree, and
Thanks,
actually,
Judy.
Jeff just put in the chat something that I was going to say, which is, watch the conversation with Senator Sanders and Jon Stewart from a couple nights ago.
I didn't
And you
see
can,
that.
yeah, but you can find it on the Google that, as they say, and you'll find it really, and again, Bernie's been at this saying the same thing for a while, but
Right.
more
So,
people are receptive and hearing
since
it.
45.
Yeah. So check out
Even
what Jeff
Trump is
Jeff
trying
says
to
there.
drop the healthcare issue. Waste of
Okay, Mona.
yes, it's Lucy next to me
Oh,
here.
Lucy.
Hi, this is a psychological question. I know you're in a group of wealthy people that have good points to make. And I'm just totally mystified by how people can be that rich and not care. I mean, what is the psychology? Is it just money? Is it money, power? And is there any way to get at them psychologically? Because wealthy people who don't do that, who are, working for justice. So I'm just, is there anything we can do to, and it's not just the billionaires, it's all those who support the billionaires.
Yeah,
No,
no,
I don't get it.
yeah. I mean, I'm not a expert on this, but my experience is there's, the wealthy are not a monolithic group, but people are concerned about legacy or immortality, depending on how you think about it. So part of the reason why you hit that $30 million mark and you've met all your needs, but you keep going, you keep focusing on accumulating more, is about I want to live forever. I want to have my name on the hospital and the building. I want my children to not suffer, and so I'm going to build a wealth dynasty, and I'm going to create trusts that money will flow down to my unborn great-grandchildren and all this kind of stuff. There's this obsession. Actually, there's a terrific new film called Death and Taxes by my friend Justin Shine. Death and Taxes. I recommend it, and you could even have Justin come and do a screening maybe for UUJEC and talk about it. It's a lot about his father, who kind of is obsessed with avoiding the estate tax and goes to great lengths. And you get a little window into that. But power is very addictive. And then I would say among the affluent, it sort of reflects the fact that we do live in an insecure society, that even people who are affluent or what we might consider wealthy still don't feel like anyone's going to take care of them if they get sick, or they feel that vulnerability that everyone feels, but they are trying to build a wall of money around themselves. So not so much the billionaire class, but say people who are in the top 5% still have that lingering feeling like, oh, I could fall all the way on one illness or divorce or job loss or the market tanks, whatever. I feel that vulnerability. And I wrote this book about advantage called Born on Third Base, and my point there was, think of the wealthy. A segment of the wealthy are waiting to be invited home, back to the table. Some people are beyond reach and beyond engagement, but I think most people want to be part of connected communities, interdependent communities. That is our nature. But they don't, privilege and wealth is an addiction drug. It's a disconnection drug. It keeps people apart and keeps people from authentic reciprocal relationships. So that's just my little 2 cents on that. And
Okay. One comment, I went to the rally in Salem, Oregon, and people were so happy. I smiled the whole time with the balloons and everything. It was a real uplift.
yeah,
Being in community.
Joy is a radical act. As you'll appreciate, my wife and I moved to a small Vermont town. We've only really been here 6-7 years. But the most important thing we did was we organized a weekly coffee clatch every Friday from 8 to 10. If you're passing through Guilford, Vermont, come to the Broadbrook Community Center and have a cup of coffee. And 40, 50 people come. There's no agenda. It's just neighborliness. And there's a lot of people there who voted for the president. And I'll tell you, those are the first people to stop and pull you out of a ditch. So it is an opportunity to remember what holds us together, what we have in common. There's a lot of kind of informal mutual aid that comes out of it. During the coffee clatch, halfway through, we always have everybody stop their conversation, just go around the circle, introduce themselves, and say their name, what road they live on, and is there one topic you'd like to talk to your neighbors about? And it's just fantastic. So for me, it's kind of a form of civic infrastructure that is missing, and it's part of our work is wherever we are to kind of reweave the social fabric at whatever place we are. So I encourage you, and I grew up in this northern Michigan town where my dad used to take me to the men's coffee clatch every week, and it was at the fire station, and it was this dreadful Sanka coffee in a styrofoam cup, but that's where you got the gossip. That's where you got the gossip. So anyway, let's not, I think that is part of our, the resistance of joy and community building that is part of how we're going to get ourselves out of this mess.
Totally. Well, do we have any more questions? Usually this group is full of them.
Well, I really enjoy being with you all, and I hope you check out the book and check out inequality.org if you haven't participated, and get your local library to order a copy or whatever,
Good.
Yeah, it's great to see some of you who I've seen over the years at General Assembly and other places. So keep the faith, keep up the good work.
Hello,
I love
Chuck.
seeing the programs. Hey,
I'm here
who's
with Lucy and Mona. So
Hey,
hiding in the
Dick.
background here.
Dick Burkhart lurking
Burkhart.
back there.
Right,
I know. Take care of that heart, man.
right.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you
All
so
right.
much, Chuck.
Take care, all. Thank you for coming out on a Wednesday,
And sure
Thursday
read your
night.
book for sure.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
God bless. Take
Thank
care.
you. It's beautiful.
Thanks.